remainder of the milk. We picked up 80 gallons today. We put 20 over here, and that means I should have 60 left in the tank. This will hold 60 gallons. Usually I put it up to 50, but we'll see if it's able to take all of the milk. Okay. Just be sure that this valve is closed before you add the milk. I rinsed it, so there's water draining right now, but certainly before you add the milk, go ahead and close the valve. You have to pull this out to get it to move. And then I have heavy cream here that I'm gonna add because I need to pasteurize it. So everything needs to be pasteurized because I'm making ice cream and I'm making soft cheese. So I'll add my heavy cream to my milk, I'll pasteurize it, but then I'm gonna separate the cream again because I'll need it back. So now we're going to pasteurize the milk that we just put in there. This is a chart recorder, and this is your legal documentation, you know, that you got up to temperature. These are charts. So I'm going to open my door. Sometimes the screw needs to be adjusted so that it doesn't fall off, but you pull this metal piece up, and that lifts your pens. You lift up this middle piece, and then you just get the paper out from under these tabs. I like to usually leave one piece of paper just as to protect it. And then I'm going to grab another one, a fresh one. Sometimes the dairy department is going to want to see your records. So we need to make sure that they're filled out properly. And you can always refer back to one of them to remember what to put on it. But I like to put on Kentucky Creamery because that's where I got the milk. And then antibiotic negative, and I have to put the number. The farmer gave me a number on a piece of paper, and I've got to put that number here. So I'm going to put that there. Today's date, my initials. So who's making the cheese, the date, where I got it from, how many gallons. So this batch right here is 20 gallons, plus I have 2.5 gallons of cream. So I'm gonna do 22.5 gallons. And then what am I making with it? So I'm gonna do Beau Cerveau. We're gonna do ice cream. And I'm gonna do lesser. Okay, and I'm going to put my paper back in. Be sure to put this down. If you don't put this down, you might not discover it until later, and then what you'll find is it never was turning. There is a start point here. If you wanted to set the time on your paper, you could. I generally don't, but you could if you wanted. Push the pens down, close the door, and you're good to go there. Now I'm going to hook up my paddles. This is a nice feature. You can move this head out of the way so that you can work around it. But you've got to put it back in. Otherwise your paddles don't match. They don't line up properly. So when you put this in, don't just put it in like that. Give the whole bar some movement and push. And make sure it's not moving. I'm going to take my paddles first. This one tricks everybody. This goes on this arm. So the first place, your cutters will both go on the turning part, but this is a stationary piece, and this is called a baffle. Your baffle goes on this stationary piece. And give it a little wiggle, make sure it's level and seated well. this piece goes over here, you don't need this adapter. We'll use that for the cutters when we get to that point. So you only need a direct connection. And again, make sure it's flat. I have sometimes accidentally had it a little bit off, and just a millimeter will make things hit each other. So just make sure it's seated well. If you hear scraping, stop and then check your connections. The second part to go on is this. Just slide it right in there, nice and close. Then I'm going to use my airspace thermometer and a gasket, and then a short clamp. And these are called tri-clamps. And I'm going to put that in this hole. But you could put these in any hole. It doesn't really matter, but this is the way I go. Generally, I put this one here. And this is the airspace thermometer. The next one is my milk thermometer. So this pasteurizer is for 50 gallons, but you could have 10 gallons in here. It just has to cover the bottom of the thermometer. And you should sanitize this before putting it in. I want to make sure this arm can clear, so check your cords. I generally don't clamp this in. I think it'd be difficult for it to come out, but it may be wise to clamp that in, but I generally don't. I'm going to take my element top right here. You always make sure that it's cool when you're picking it up. Don't ever pick it up while it's on. And this takes a little finagling. Go in this way. And then it should settle. And then grab your you want those to be just like that. When I start it, so now over here, you can see I have it set for 139, but I really want 145. So the elements are down here. There are two of them. They will shut off at 139, but it'll keep going up to 145. We have to pasteurize 145 for 30 minutes. If I want both elements on, I would put it on heating high. If I only wanted one element, because I only wanted a little bit of heat, I would do low. That would only be one element. I can control the thermostat here, but in general, I just leave it that on high. I don't mess with the thermostat. When I first start this up, I want to put my speed really, really low, and I'm going to put on stirring. And the reason why I'm going so slow is I'm listening, just to make sure. Sometimes the elements here will catch, and I have to jiggle this a little bit, but that sounds good. I don't hear any sound. Now I'm going to pasteurize, and when I pasteurize, I have stirring. I keep motor acceleration high. I never use low. Temperature heating, and I want both elements. I don't want just one element. So both elements. Now when I put on the airspace heater, that airspace heater is this element right here. And that's plugged in right here. And this is what controls your chart recorder. This recorder on the paper that's on the back will not start turning until I turn this on. And now you see the speed changes on its own. As soon as it sees that the airspace heater's on, it knows I'm pasteurizing, and it has to spin at a certain rate. If I wanted my chart recorder on, but I did not want any heat, but I wanted the recorder on, I would unplug from here, and that would keep my recorder going. I always like to look at my lights. You should have all three lights on. This would be if you had a propylene glycol cooling system, which we don't. We don't need to do that. This cools off very quickly, but that's the only one that's not lit. And that's essentially pasteurizing. When we come over and look at the chart, once the temperature gets to be up, you'll start to see, I want it to go to 145, and I'm gonna hold it at 145 here. I wanna hold it for 30 minutes. And if you look at these marks, 10, 20, 30, once it gets up to 145, which is right there, let's say it started there, I'd go 10, 20, 30, and then I could shut it off. Okay, that's really all there is to it for pasteurizing. It looks at first intimidating, but it's not. Your temperature recordings are here. You're going to see, you should monitor those, make sure that they agree with your chart. Make sure it also agrees pretty much with this. I find sometimes this one's off a little bit, but make sure that chart is reading what these guys are reading. And that's it. So we're still pasteurizing, and you can see that the red one, the marker hasn't really gone up very much, but it hasn't even gotten to 90 degrees. So see, but look at the green one. The green one's way up here, and we're at 141. That's just the airspace. The green is the airspace. You do want to see the green one going up at least 10 degrees above the red one. So once you get up to 145, the green should be at least 155. Sometimes the green doesn't go high enough, and I've spoken to Harold. I'll make sure we have Harold's number and name. He thinks it's this cord, which is for your element, and I don't know why, but it may be that eventually that cord has to be replaced, but at the moment it's working well, and I just have had a couple times where it didn't quite get up as high as I wanted it. It got equal to the red one. At this point, we're at 89 degrees, and we still have a little ways to go. So we'll check back in. So just a minute ago, I heard a sound. It almost sounded like the heating elements had shut off, but when I looked here, we hadn't reached 139 degrees, so that I paused. That's why I stopped recording. But if you look at the heating element light, it's still on. So even though I didn't hear a sound, the heating element is still going. And what we'll see is once we get up to 139, that heating element light will shut off. So back to the pasteurizer, 139, we're at 144.3.4, and our light is off. So it knew to shut off at 139. So we're gonna get to 145, which we're very close, and come over here. Our airspace heater is at least 10 degrees higher than our milk, 145. So now we wanna stay there for 30 minutes. So we're at the mark where it says 20, so we're going to want to go 30, 40, just below 50. If it goes a little longer, that's fine. So at this point we've done our 145. We've actually gone a little bit longer. If you look, it's 10, 20, 30, we're at about 35. And I like the airspace heater. I like the green. I like that it's 164 compared to 152. That's great. We only had to go to 145 and it went to 152, and you can see on the chart, yep, it's accurate. It's reading about 152, so perfect. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go ahead and turn off my heat, my airspace heater, and I'm going to turn off my heat. The temperature you don't need to change, but just make sure you shut the heat off. When you look at your heating elements, you can see that it's off. Notice that the speed slowed down because I have my speed low, but when it was pasteurizing, it goes always at a very consistent speed. So now I'm going to up my speed. There we go. I'm going to up my speed, and I'm going to start cooling. I'm going to take the hose, and I'm going to use my quick connect, and I'm going to quick connect it to here, and then I'll turn that valve on. But to release the pressure from this hose, I've got to go ahead and shut off my water. Right now it's on hot, so I'm shutting off the hot water. I'm going to release the pressure, get rid of any pressure, and I won't be able to film it, but I'm just going to take the quick connect off and connect it. As far as processing next, I want to turn off the stirring, but I need to get that out of the way, so let's go right here. I'm going to come over here, and just to protect the instruments, I like to take them off. I want to get everything off so they don't fall off. So I'll pull this out of the way. I like to put the short one on the right because sometimes, like if you're lifting the vat with that lever, if your back was to kind of come up and hit that, you could pop it out, and then that would be, you know, an expensive repair. There's this one. Pay attention to where your cords are. This one likes to get caught. This is to that element. So we want to pull this guy out, get him out of the way before we put this one in. There we go. And this one's going to take 2 hands, but basically just like I put it in. So it's cool now because it's been off for a while. I'm going to lift it, and I might have to jostle that other plate out of the way a little bit, but I'll just kind of work its way out. But I want to make sure that I don't catch these elements that are in there. All right, so I don't want to be yanking around too much because there's elements there and I want to protect those. So I'm just careful about how I lift it out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So usually when you're lifting it out, just push this plate back at the same time. So as you're lifting the other one out with one hand, kind of push that plate back a little bit. And then it hangs up here. And just be sure that both hooks are on there. Make sure it's steady before you let it go. Okay, so now I have my hose connected to here. I can go back to my water, but now I'm going to turn on the cold water because I don't want the hot water. And put it on full, because if you only put it on partial, this valve, this sort of a backflow valve, it doesn't like it. So put that on full. You'll control your flow through this. And I like to start off at a pretty good pressure. You know, that's going to be hot water coming out of there. And after a few minutes, you know, once there's enough hot water I feel like has circulated out, I'll slow down how much water's coming out just so I don't waste a lot of water, but it really doesn't matter. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to cool, and we're headed for 90 degrees. Well, I'll shut it off probably at about 98.